All right, Rabosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking our sponsors. I thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Elul, Jerry and Sarah Wolaski, for dedicating all the Sherman Drushos this month in the Schus Refuah Shalema for Zechariah Dov Ben Perel Shira. To thank the Tilson and Wall families of Eretz Yisrael. And so we're wishing our mishpacha mazel tov on all the simchas this summer. Continued simchas, hatzlacha, and mazel for all of us. To thank Shani and Avram Kelman, also from Eretz Yisrael, Baruch Hashem, for dedicating all the Shumer Drushos this month in memory of their beloved parents and in the schus of all of those who need a refuah shalema. To thank our Week of Learning sponsors, Nancy and David Berkowitz, in celebration of their son Jonathan's recent engagement to Rachel Harris. May the chas and the kala meretz Hashem go to the chuppah b'sha'a tova u'mitzlachas. Rabosai, with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Yud Beis. I want to begin by thanking Rabbi Richter for giving shir. First of all, welcoming Rabbi Richter back, and also thanking him for giving shir yesterday. We are picking up in Meretz Hashem on Yud Beis Amud Aleph at the two dots, which is the first wide line. So just to reorient ourselves a little bit, we have now transitioned into the section of the Mishnah discussing Kesef Kiddushin, or Kiddushin B'Kesef, affecting Kiddushin through giving money, and a fundamental machlokes of Sham Beis Hillel on how much money has to be given in order to affect Kiddushin. So remember again, Beis Shammai was of the opinion that you have to give a dinar. So we saw a number of different opinions as to why it is that you have to give a dinar. Really, most notably the last two were Reish Lakish, who interestingly enough learned out Kesef Kiddushin from Amma Ivriya, and then ultimately again the sugya ended off with Rava, and Rava said Shelo yu benos Yisrael kehefker, that Kiddushin should be something significant, Kiddushin should be something meaningful. It shouldn't be that you could just betroth a Jewish woman for, I forgot to mention, Mazel Tov to Dr. Lanebaum on the birth of a grandson. Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. Late breaking Mazel Tov. I think good. Baruch Hashem. Shebizochet Meretz Hashem. Timach nesim lebiso sh'Avram Avinu, and bizochet tesim negalu Torah l'chuppah u'lamaisim tovim. So remember again, so you shouldn't be able to go ahead and affect Kiddushin with such a small amount of money. It cheapens Kiddushin, and therefore again they said you put it at a dinar. Fine, so that's the position of Beis Shammai. We now come to Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel omrim bepruta. Beis Hillel says a pruta. So Savra Yosef the Meimar. So we'll say, so now, here's what's interesting, and this is what we're going to get into, is pruta could mean one of two things. Well, let's see. So Savra Yosef the Meimar, pruta kol duhu. So Rav Yosef assumed that when we say a pruta means what we call kol duhu. Now, what does it mean kol duhu? Kol duhu means literally any amount. Look at Rashi. Kol duhu. Kol ma shadoros mishanim es hamatbeya pamim shepochsim pamim shemosif mishkalam. Now, both say what a pruta represents in halacha is the smallest unit of currency. Right? Smallest unit of currency. So the shaila is now, what we'll see is, smallest doesn't have to necessarily mean the smallest, right? But what it means is like the smallest amount of currency that's still considered to be something of significance. See, here's what's interesting. Rav Yosef wanted to say that pruta is totally what we'll call societally subjective. In other words, that wherever you are and wherever you live, so pruta represents the smallest unit of significant currency. Now, by the way, lav dafka penny, might be like $1. Like something that's the smallest unit of what you would consider to be a significant amount of money, right? But the point Rav Yosef is making is there's no objective value for a pruta. A pruta is determined societally. Fine, Amalei Abaye. Abaye says, 1 second. Vaha Allah katani, but that's not what the Mishnah said. The Mishnah itself said, Kamahi pruta, echa mishmona be'esra tanki. Well, see, it's interesting. The Mishnah didn't leave pruta undefined. Remember, what did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah said that a pruta is 1/8 of an Italian isser. 1/8 of an Italian isser. Now, we'll say, now it's interesting. The Mishnah didn't have to define pruta. We all know that colloquially, pruta means smallest unit of meaningful currency. The fact that the Mishnah goes out of its way to define it as 1/8 of an Italian isser tells you what? That maybe this is an objective amount of currency. Maybe the Mishnah is just giving me like a historical value of a pruta. That in times of Moshe Rabbeinu, that was the value of a pruta. Aval hocha ki de'achsheva lehu inshi. But now, we'll say a pruta essentially is worth whatever. In other words, again, it's societally subjective. Whatever is considered to be the most basic unit of meaningful currency, that's a pruta. I have a haki asr. See this fundamental machlokas. Is a pruta an objectively valued coin or an objectively valued currency, like the Mishnah says, 1/8 of an Italian isser? Or is it halacha l'maisa societally subjective and representative of the most basic unit of meaningful currency? I have a hakias Rav Dimi Amar Shir Rabbi Simai Bidoro Kamahi Pruta. Rav Dimi came along and he said that Rabbi Simai valued in his generation what is the value of a pruta, and he said Echad Mishmona be'Isra Italki, 1/8 of an Italian isser. So Rabbi Simai, in his own generation, valued a pruta at 1/8 of an Italian isser. Yet the Chi Asarabin Amrabi Distai Rabbi Yanai Rabbi Oshia Shiru Kamahabi Pruta Echad Mishisha Beisra Italki. Yet interestingly enough, when Ravin came along, he called Rabbi Dastai, Rabbi Yanai, and Rabbi Oshia, and they valued the isra at how much? They valued the isra at 1/6. They valued the dinar, the pruta, at 1/6 of an Italian isser. I want to say, it's interesting. It says machlokas as to how to value the pruta. Rav Yosef said, Ihachi hainu ditanina. This is what we learn. So what do you do with the following statement? Say the chashav kama prutos b'shnei slime. Go out and see how many prutos are there in 2 slime. So the Gemara says, Braisa says, Yoser me'alpayim. There's more than 2,000 prutos in 2 slime. The Gemara says, no, there's not. Hashta alpayim lo havyan. There's not even, we're going to show, there's not even 2,000 prutos. There's not even 2,000 prutos in 2 slime. Yesra me'alpayim karilu. So if there's not even 2,000, why would you say there's more than 2,000? Amar lahu hahu saba ana tanina karov la'apayim. I didn't mean that. He said, no, read it. It shouldn't read as more than 2,000. Rather, it should mean what? Close to 2,000. But that's not even true. So you want to know how many prutos there were? How many prutos there are in 2 dinar? How many prutos there are in 2 slime? In case you were interested, here's the answer. Alpa v'chamesh mea utlasin v'shisa. In fact, there's 1,536 prutos in 2 slime. So the Gemara says, Hu dahavyon. So if that's the case, 1,536, why do you call that close to 2,000? That's not close to 2,000. To which the Gemara says, Kevan denafka luhu mepalga karov la'alpayim. Once you kind of reach, once you're over the 1,500 mark, we consider you close to 2,000. Right? So, okay, fine. That's right. Use lashon of 2,000. Fine. So we'll say, now watch this. So Gufa, Ki Asr Rav Dimi Amar Shir Rabbi Simai Bedoro Kama Hi Pruta. So we'll say, so when Rav Dimi came along, he said that Rabbi Simai measured for his own generation. How much is a pruta? Echad Mishmona Be'isra Ha'italki. Again, 1/8 of an Italian isser. V'chi Asr Bin Amar Shiur Rabbi Dostai Rabbi Yanai Rabbi Oshia Kama Hi Pruta. So we'll say, so once again, the same achlokis we quoted before. What is the value of a pruta? So we have one opinion saying it's 1/8 of an Italian isser. By the way, that's the opinion quoted in the Mishnah. And the second opinion quoted saying it's 1/6 of an Italian isser. Amar li Abai Rav Dimi. So Abai said to Rav Dimi, Nema at v'ravin beplukta dahani tanoi kamiflagisu. So Rabbi said to Rav Dimi, you and Rabbi Rabin must be engaged in the same machlokes tanoim, as we see in the volume. This sign, here we go. Pruta sh'amru chachamim, the pruta that Chazal mentioned, echad mishmona be'isra italki. So Rabbi says, listen to this. So the Brisa says as follows. The pruta is the first opinion. The pruta that Chazal spoke about is 1/8 of an Italian isser. Now we'll say, now the Brisa is going to go through the entire breakdown of currency, which is sheish ma'a kesef dinar. 6 silver ma'a make up a dinar. ma itself, shnei pundion, is 2 pundion. Pundion, shnei isrin, a pundion itself is made of 2 isrin. Isser, shnei musmisin, an isser itself is 2 musmisin. Also, these just different forms of coinage. Mismas, shnei kuntrunkin, right? A mismas is 2 kuntrunkin. A kuntrunk is shnei prutos. So we'll say if you do the math, nimsa pruta achos mishmona be'isra italki. Say Rabbi say, now that you understand the relationship of all these coins together, it turns out that 1 pruta is an eighth of an Italian isser. Is an eighth of an Italian isser. Okay. Rabbi Shmuel Silber is supposed to say that's the first opinion. That's the first opinion. This is the Chachamim. Rabbi Shmuel Silber says shlosha hadresin lema'a. There are 3 hadresin that go into every ma'a. Shnei hinsin lehidris. 2 hinsin in digital. So it's actually interesting because this is fascinating. Is they're talking about different coins, which is also interesting, different currency. Shnei shimnin lehens. There are 2 himnin in a hens. Beis prutos lishmin. Nimtza pruta achos mishisha be'isra italki. It turns out that at the end of the day, a pruta is 1/6 of an Italian isser. So Rabbi says, see, here you have it. Here you have it. A machlokes, Rabbi Shmuel and the Chachamim about the value of a pruta. Is a pruta 1/8 of an Italian isser, or is a pruta 1/6 of an Italian isser? So Abai wanted to suggest that the machlokes we saw over here before is actually machlokes tanoim, to which the Gemara is lemed demar amar kitanakama. So Shmuel, you hold like the Tanakama that a pruta is 1/8 of an Italian isser, and at the end of the day, the Rabbin the Amar Reb Shmuel and Rabbin holds like Reb Shmuel that a pruta is in fact 1/8 of an Italian isser. Okay, so we'll say so. Just what's happening over here is this whole machlokes is in fact the machlokes tanoim. Strongly bein didi bein Rabbin. So Reb Shmuel said no. Both myself and Rabbin alibu the Tanakama. We both hold. This is actually interesting. We both hold like the Tanakama that in essence, a pruta is 1/8 of an Italian isser. We both hold that way. Velo kasha, had the ikar isuri, had the zil isuri. So Rabbi say, all we're pointing out is that sometimes the value could fluctuate when what? When the isser itself fluctuates. That's all. In other words, everyone's going to agree that the value of a pruta, everyone, not everyone agrees, because we'll say obviously it is a machlokes tanaim. Just to point out, Rabbi Shmuel is saying that a pruta is 1/6 of an Italian isser. Tanakama the Rabbanan are saying that it's 1/8 of an Italian isser. Or Rabbi Shmuel is saying is that halacha l'maisa. Myself and Rabbin, we don't disagree. We don't disagree. Halacha l'maisa, we both hold that a pruta is 1/8 of an Italian isser. So why are we giving different valuations? Because the value of an isser itself could fluctuate. Whether the isser appreciates or depreciates, ultimately again will determine its relationship to the pruta. Okay, v'lo kasha had the ikar isuri, had the zal isuri, had the ikar isuri when the isser goes up. Klom esrim v'arba bezuzah. Ultimately, again, it's worth 24 tuzos. Had the zul kum tlasu train bezuzah. Ultimately, again, when it depreciates or goes down in value, ultimately, again, it's 32 tuzos, 32 for a zuz. So Rabbi says, so again, what comes out over here is, although it is a machlokes tanoim, the Gemara is suggesting that the machlokes Reb Shmuel and Rabbin ultimately is not that machlokes tanoim, and at the end of the day, both will agree that halacha l'maisa the isser is 1/8 of an Italian. Sorry, the pruta is 1/8 of an Italian isser, as mentioned in the Mishnah. Both say that's why the Mishnah itself doesn't record a machlokes, right? The Mishnah itself doesn't record a machlokes. The Mishnah itself halacha l'maisa just adds in that one particular value. Okay, so I'll say, so interestingly enough, well, that's the end of this sugya over here. What we come out with is, there is a fundamental machlokes about the value of a pruta. Is a pruta 1/6 of an Italian isser? Is it 1/8 of an Italian isser? But I will say, what is interesting to note is, for our purposes, we do really adopt the view that for Kiddushin purposes, pruta really represents the most basic unit of meaningful currency in the contemporary society in which you live. Which is why, for example, today, right, when we use a ring to effect Kiddushin, But remember, again, there's no mechanism of Kiddushin b'tabas, Kiddushin with the ring. When you use a ring, which avenue of Kiddushin are you availing yourself of? Kesef. So what do we ask the chassan under the chuppah? What do we ask him? 2 questions. Number 1, is it yours? Is it yours? Did you buy it with your own money? And number 2, is it worth at least $1? Not a penny, not a nickel, not a quarter. It's got to be worth at least $1, right? Why? Again, I'm assuming that $1 is at least an eighth of an Italian isser, right? But lamaisa, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter for our purposes. Because remember, again, for our purposes, the definition of a pruta is the most basic unit of meaningful currency, which again, contemporarily, I think we'd all agree, is $1. Is $1. Once you have $1, that's meaning, because that's the halacha l'maisa. Good, let's go weiter. Amar Shmuel, this is some really interesting, this is actually fascinating. Kidsha b'tamra, listen to this. Reuven goes over to Rachel, he gives her a date, just to be clear, not asks her out on a date, gives her a date, like literally. Here's a date, right? So we'll say, what happens? Now he says, Hari'at mikudeshes li b'tamra zu, become mikudeshes to me with this date. With this date. So what's the shayla say? What's the shayla? Is this a shava pruta or not? Is this a shava pruta? So it says, Marafilu omed kortmara b'dinar mikudeshes. Even if halacha l'maisa, you could buy an entire core. Now, we'll say a core is a large measure. So if you could buy a core of dates for a dinar, that means an individual date is not worth a pruta. See, even if where you live, you could buy an entire core of dates for a pruta, she's still mekudeshes. Why? Because it's wild. We'll say because maybe, although it's not shava pruta here, maybe it's shava pruta elsewhere. I will say Shmuel is introducing us to this incredible concept that if you are mekadesh a woman with an object that is not shava pruta in the locale in which you live, you have to be choshesh that maybe it's, although it's not a shava pruta here, it is worth shava pruta elsewhere, and therefore she'll be mikudeshes, which is pretty wild. So the Gemara says, V'hanan tanan, but we learned, Beisilo omrim bepruta b'shava pruta. But 1 second, but Beisilo said that in order to go ahead and affect Kiddushin, now both say, by the way, Rashi just points out, why does Shmuel use madai? Rashi says, Kilomar b'makum shein timar mitsuyin. Everyone knew that in Madai, you couldn't get dates. You couldn't get dates, right? So because you couldn't get dates, dates were more expensive there. Fine. So the Gemara says, really, is this so? But we learned in the Mishnah, but Beisila says explicitly in the Mishnah that halacha l'maisa, in order for Kiddushin b'kesef to work, what has to happen? You have to go and affect Kiddushin either with a pruta or with something that is shava pruta. Not possibly shava pruta, but actually shava pruta. Lokasha, here we go. Ha b'kiddushay vadai, ha b'kiddushay safek. They say this is incredible. You're right. Shmuel is not saying that halacha l'maisa. That is supposed to say, let's play this out. Right. So Reuven is being mekadesh Rachel in Yerushalayim. So we'll say, so let's say now in Yerushalayim, there's plenty of dates. So everyone knows that a date in Yerushalayim is not shava pruta. Shmuel says we have to be choshesh that although a date here is not shava pruta, a date in Tel Aviv is shava pruta. So therefore we'll say, so what is Shmuel saying? So now the Gemara clarifies, Shmuel is saying, Safek mikudeshes. Not Vadai mikudeshes, not Vadai, but Safek. Since there is the possibility that the item given for Kiddushin is worth a shava pruta, is worth a pruta somewhere, therefore, Safek mikudeshes. Which is pretty wild, we'll say. Safek mikudeshes. So again, such according to Shmuel, if you use an item that is for sure worth a pruta, so that is Vadai mikudeshes. If you use an item that is possibly shava pruta, Safek mikudeshes. We say possibly shava pruta means I know for sure here in Yerushalayim where the Kiddushin is taking place, it's not shava pruta. But maybe in a different place, it is shava pruta. Therefore, Safek mikudeshes. So we'll say this is actually pretty wild. Take a look at Rashi in just a moment. Rashi is 5 lines up from the bottom. Ha b'kiddushay vaday im yeshno shavar pruta b'mkomo ha v'kiddushin vaday. So if the item that you're using for kiddushin definitely is a shavar pruta, that affects kiddushay vaday. V'im ba achar v'kitsha achar kach mutaris l'rishon ve'in tzricha get misheni. Now what that means is, imagine the following situation, right? Ruvain gives Rachel an item of kiddushin in Yerushalayim. So what happens? Let's say again, a simple case, the object is definitely shavar pruta. Definitely shavar pruta. Fine. She accepts it. Or Mikudesh Asli because of Zu, fantastic. Or by item Zu, fantastic. Then what happens? Levi comes along and gives Rachel kiddushin. We both say, what's the effect of Shimon's kiddushin? What's the effect? Zero. Meaningless. Why? Because Rachel's already married to Ruvain. Good, fine. So the Gemara says, so v'im eino shavar pruta b'mkomo kiddushay vadei lo havu libatal kiddushay sheni aval kiddushay savek havu ve'eino muteres la'acher below get dechayshin shema shavar pruta b'madai v'shir ahani. So let's listen to this. So now what's the problem? The problem is in case number 2. So we'll say case number 1, Ruvain gave Rachel an item that is absolutely shavar pruta. If he does that, the Kudesh has nothing more to talk about. If he gives her an item that is not Shaveh Pruta here in Yerushalayim, but that to be Choshesh, maybe it's Shaveh Pruta somewhere else, so now this is a problematic case. Because now Rabbi says she's Safek Mikudesh to Ruvain. Let's see, what happens now if Shimon comes along and gives her Kiddushin? Let's say he gives her Mamish Pruta. What happens? Now it's Safek. So I'll say now it's Safek Mikudeshes to Ruvain, Safek Mikudeshes to Shimon, and now she's really in a bind. Now again, what we would make her do in that kind of case is receive a get from each of these men, but it's a mess. It's a mess. That's really what it means. So I'll say, so that's the impact of Shmuel's statement. So I'll say, so this really kind of blows things open a lot, because what Shmuel essentially is saying is, up until this point, up until I saw Shmuel, I assumed that halacha l'maaseh, any time you give a woman something that's not worth a pruta, there's, as they say, ein alma lidaber. There is nothing to talk about. There's nothing to talk about. There's no kiddushin here. Shmuel comes along and says, no, there might be something to talk about here, because even though it's not worth a shavar pruta here, maybe worth a shavar pruta somewhere else, and therefore safek mikudeshes. Incredible. So let's go back to the Gemara. We'll say we are in Yud Beis Amud Aleph, 12a, 2, 4, 6, 7 lines up from the bottom. Hau Gavra, there was a guy, the Akdish Bizavda the Ardi, so he was Makadish woman with Zavda. There was Zavda. Rashi says Aguda Shel Muchin. Literally, I will say like a ball of wool. Like a ball of wool. What's Makadish with a ball of wool? So what happened? Yosef Rav Simi Bar Chia, Kamei Dirav. So Rav Simi Bar Chia was sitting in front of Rav. The Kama Ayin Ba, and Rav Simi Bar Chia was examining it. Now, why was he examining it? To see if it was worth a pruta. He's evaluating it. He's evaluating it. So Ma'ayin Ba is a shavar pruta ilo, right? Sorry, is be shavar pruta in ilo lo. He was just trying to figure out, does the ball of wool, is it a shavar pruta? If it is, great, she's going to be mekudeshes. If she's not, she won't be mekudeshes. V'lespa shavar pruta lo. But is that true? Rav Simi Bar Chia, is that true? Even if the ball of muchin, right, even if the ball of isn't worth a shavar pruta, it's not so clear that she's not mekudeshes. After all, v'ha'amar Shmuel chayshinon. But Shmuel said, I will say, even if it's not shavar pruta, Shmuel now introduced us to this idea that halacha l'maisa, maybe it's worth a pruta somewhere else. So, lo kasha, ha b'kiddushay vaday, ha b'kiddushay safek. Yes, you're right. Rasim Rachia was not trying to discount Shmuel. What he was trying to figure out was, A, is it worth a pruta? If it's worth a pruta, great, she's mikudeshes. If it's not worth a pruta, inachinami, we may have a problem of safek kiddushin. Safek kiddushin, because even though she's not mikudeshes here, or even though it's not worth a pruta, maybe it's worth a pruta somewhere else. Okay, incredible. Hogar, what's another case? Hogar, the aktish ba'avno the kuchla. Interesting case. There was a guy, we'll call him Ruvain. Ruvain gave Rachel a blue stone. A blue stone. Yosef Rav Chisda became a Sharley. So Rav Chisda was sitting, and looking at the stone, trying to assess its value, to see, do we have a pruta's value here or not? I isbe shavar pruta in, I lo. If it has a shavar pruta, she's mikudeshes. If not. So the Gemara says, really? Let's pay shavar pruta lo. V'amar Shmuel chashinon. Once again, what about Shmuel? What about Shmuel? Shmuel says, well, say again, remember, that even if it's not Shava Pruta here, maybe it's Shava Pruta somewhere, to which the Gemara says, Rav Chisda lo savar le de Shmuel. Rav Chisda rejected the view of Shmuel. Okay, so that's pretty easy. So we'll say Rav Chisda didn't hold of this. He held that, no. We'll say Kiddushin is defined, and actually it makes sense, just like we would say that Pruta is defined societally, right? The definition of the most basic unit of currency is defined societally. So too, again, what is worth a pruta also follows in line, is defined societally. So Rav Chisda rejects. So I just want to point out, what you have right now are two dramatically opposed schools of thought. Rav Chisda telling us that the value of a pruta is only determined here where the Kiddushin is taking place. That's it. If it's worth a pruta here, mikudeshes. If it's not worth a pruta here, not mikudeshes. Shmuel says, no, you have to be choshesh that even something that is not worth a pruta here may be worth a pruta somewhere else. So what's interesting is, according to Shmuel, which is very dramatic, because according to Shmuel, you're going to have like a ton of Safek Mikudeshes cases, right? Because any item, now obviously, again, could you imagine a case where even Shmuel would say that something is not worth a pruta? Yeah, a guy picks up a pebble, right, and gives it to a case. So I think there are certain things that everyone would agree, no matter where you are not going to be worth a pruta, right? But Lamaisa, other than that, Shmuel opens up the door to a lot of Safek Mikudeshes cases. Okay, in any event, Rav Chisda rejects this view. Rav Chisda rejects it. So the Gemara says, listen to this. Amrle Ime. So listen to this. So the mother, right? So the mother said to Rav Chisda. So the mother said to Rav Chisda, Amrle Ime, V'ha'ahu Yoma Dikitsha Hava Be Shava Pruta. So I said, listen to this. So the mother said to Rav Chisda, on the day, so apparently Rav Chisda, let's just play this out, right? So Reuven gave Rachel this blue stone on Monday. Right? Fine. So what happens? Then the Shaila came up, right? They're at L'chaim. The Shaila comes up. People looking, I don't know if it's not worth a Shava Pruta or not. They bring it to Rav Chisda. Right? So Rav Chisda is examining it. So now let's say it's Wednesday. Rav Chisda is examining it to figure out if it's Shava Pruta or not. So the mother comes over to Rav Chisda and says, by the way, I just wanted to let you know, on Monday, it was worth a Pruta. Right, because after all, again, values fluctuate. On Monday, it was worth a pruta. So Rav Chisda said, I'm sorry, lav kol kaminach dasart le'abashin. Here's what's interesting. So apparently what ended up happening was, on Wednesday, after Rav Chisda examined it, he came to the conclusion that it was not worth a pruta. In which case, there was no Kiddushin. Fine. Mother says, by the way, on Monday it was worth a pruta. Rav Chisda says, thank you, but your testimony is not enough to asr this woman upon other men. Because we'll say, remember again, essentially, by saying that the stone was worth a pruta, ultimately, again, what is the testimony of the mother doing? Saying that she's mikudeshes. If she's mikudeshes, she's asr to all the men in the world. So Rav Chisda said, I'm sorry, your word is not enough to asr Rachel upon all the other men in the world. Rashi says, Lav kol kaminach, last Rashi, Lahayid sharishon kiddushin v'osarta basra. Your word is not enough, ultimately, again, to go ahead. Right? Now we'll say, they left out one part of the story. Rashi says over here, the reason why Rav Chisda got involved, right? Why did Rav Chisda get involved in this? Rashi says what ended up happening over here is, Reuven gave Rachel the blue stone on Monday. Shimon came along and gave Rachel, a dinar on Tuesday. So now, what was the shaila? Was Reuven's Kiddushin good or not? So now, on Wednesday, Rav Chisda is looking at the stone, and he comes to the conclusion, not Shaveh Pruta. Now again, depends. Obviously, Rachel accepted the Kiddushin from Shimon, so obviously her relationship with Reuven was not exactly rock solid, right? So Lamaisa, there's something, right? So therefore, Rav Chisda said Kiddushin to Reuven didn't happen. Therefore, Kiddushin with Shimon is good. Mother, apparently of Reuven, comes along, right? mother gets involved, right? The mother comes along and says, excuse me, right? The blue stone was worth a pruta on Monday. I know, I picked it out, right? It was worth a pruta on Monday. Reb Chisda says, I'm sorry, your testimony is not enough. Right, your word, which effectively would become eidos, is not enough in this type of situation. Lav kol kaminach tasart le'abasra. So we'll say I'm a base. So you'd base on a base. 12b. Lav hainu ti Yehudis devisud Rabbi Chia. I will say this is no different. Listen, this is actually a pretty wild story. This is no different than the story of Yehudis, the wife of Rabbi Chia. They will say what happened with Yehudis. What happened with Yehudis? So the Havis Leitzar Leido. So apparently Yehudis was having significant birth pains. Rashi says over here, Tsar Leida, Shaseyoledes to Omim. She was giving birth to twins. The Amar Mar, Yehuda v'Chizkiya, Achi Pazi v'Tali Achvasa. Fine. So I say, so what happens? So Yehudis, the wife of Rabbi Chia, was giving birth to twins. Amrele, so apparently, this is actually interesting. This it's not clear whether she said this like during birth, maybe like during the pains, trying to figure out exactly why was she having such difficulty in labor. So Amrele, so listen to this. She says to her husband, Amrele, she said, so Yehudis said to her husband Rabbi Chia, Amrele aim, my mother told me, Kibel Bech Avuch Kiddushi Kizutras. This might be a good time for me to tell you, my mother always told me that my father accepted Kiddushin on my behalf when I was a young girl, betrothing me to someone else. Mazel tov, right? In other words, so listen to this. So what's happening over here, she's trying to figure out why I'm having such pain during childbirth. So her mother always told her this. Yehudis figured, why did my mother tell me this? Because she does not like my husband. Right? She doesn't like Rabbi Chia. So maybe that's at the end of the day where she was saying, oh, you know what, your father always knew there was a different guy that was for you. That's why he was Makabel Kiddushin, for you as a young girl to this other guy. She said, I always dismissed it as just being my mother not liking my husband. But maybe there's something to it. So Rabbi said, don't worry. Lav kol kamine di'imech da'asart lech ilovin. Your mother is not believed to answer you upon me. In other words, we'll say that's not a mother-in-law knock, right? What that is just saying like one person in Eid Echad, again, whether it's a man or a woman, right, would not ultimately, again, be believed to create these types of isurin. So therefore, again, Allah Chamaisa, she's not believed to say that your father accepted Kiddush on your behalf. Similarly, again, I will say in this case, over here, Ruvain's mother is not believed to say, oh, by the way, the stone was worth a pruta on Monday. Again, you want to bring eidos? Of course, again, if there's some way to document it, you have a gemologist or whatever it is, you bring some type of eidos, that's something different. But just rolling in and saying, by the way, the stone was worth a pruta on Monday, you're not believed to say that. Just rolling in and saying, by the way, your father was Makabel Kiddushin for you when you were a young girl, and the marriage you're in is currently adultery, you're not believed to say stuff like that. You're not believed to. We'll say, it's such an important yisod, I will say. Such an important yisod, and especially in today's day and age. Just because someone says something, does not make it. I will say, I don't know if you saw, there was, just important because it caused a ridiculous chilul Hashem. So it's important to, there was an article that came out, there was a Haaretz reporter who reported about an encounter she had on United Airlines. I don't know if anyone read this story, how this woman was traveling on United Airlines and she was sitting next to a Haredi man and she had to go ahead and move her seat, and it was gender discrimination. I would say there's an article that came out in Tablet magazine that she lied. That she not lied about being asked to switch her seat, but totally put together an alternate set of facts to make this like just another piece of anti-Haredi rhetoric. Like it's incredible. It's incredible. And this is Tablet magazine. Tablet magazine is not the defender of the ultra-Orthodox community. But the whole point of the article was speaking about this idea about, it's amazing. Like it used to be that the whole chap in journalism was fact-checking. Right? But before you would say something, before you print something, he's like, we live in a time now where anyone could say whatever they want, however they want, whether it's true, whether it's not true, it automatically becomes that. Because also, you know what happens? The challenge, the power of words, and yet the challenge of words is the same thing, which is once you say something, even if you want to walk it back, right? It's like what's her name? The CNN reporter who is the terrible Sona Yisrael. Amanpour. Is that her name? Kishian Amanpour. After the D family was massacred. Remember again, and she got on the news and she called it a shootout, and she apologized. And this, you say something. Still, it's okay, right? You say something. Say it's such an incredible yisod. The Gemara says, just because you say something doesn't make it true, and you could say it over and over and over, but just because you say it doesn't make it true. An incredible yisod. It was like the lashon of the Gemara is so profound. Lav kol kaminach dasart la basra. Lav kol kaminach. Just because you're saying something and you think it's correct doesn't automatically vest you with credibility. Also, can you imagine if we used this metric in contemporary society? First of all, how much less lashon hara there would be? How much less lashon hara there would be? How much less vitriol there would be? Verbal vitriol there would be? How much less animosity? If again, people thought before they spoke, number one, and even once they said something, maybe a little bit of fact checking. Maybe not everything is true just because it's stated. Incredible. And eventually says Gevaiter. Says the Gemara, Amrele Rabbanan Rav Chisda. So Rabbanan said to Rav Chisda, remember again, now going back to the blue stone story. So the Rabbanan said to Rav Chisda, Amai, ha'ika sahadi be'idis yadabahu yoma have be'shava pruta. Okay, so let's say, so now the story takes an interesting turn. Now let's say, this is mamish like reality TV over here, right? This is better than, right? See, you got Rachel accepting the blue stone from Reuven on Monday, right? Then she accepts Kiddushin from Shimon on Tuesday. Then what happens? Then they bring the stone to Rav Chisda on Wednesday. Rav Chisda said, not worth a pruta. Mother of Reuven comes along and says, yes, it is a pruta. So Rav Chisda says, I'm sorry, you're not believed to go ahead and make a statement like that, to aser Rachel on everyone else. Now the Rabbanan get involved. The Rabbanan say to Rav Chisda, there are witnesses in Idis. Idis is a place. There are witnesses in Idis that know that on Monday the stone was worth a pruta. So the Gemara says, Rav Chisda says, that's very nice. Hashta miha lo lesnu kaman. So he'll say, if they're not here, they're not here. Don't tell me about witnesses in some far-flung place. So let's say, again, in general, like if you can imagine, like any legal system at a certain point has to say, okay, there's a concept of saying, one of the most profound concepts we have in halacha is ein l'dayin lodun ela mashe'in of ro'os. A judge can only adjudicate based on what he sees in front of his eyes. If you start taking into account about every single thing, you can never reach a conclusion. Let's say it's true, not just true in adjudicating judicial matters, it's true in life. I would say, how many times in life do we want to do something, and then you know what happens? You begin overthinking it. Well, if I do this, I won't be able to do this. And if I can't do this, then I won't do this. And if I do this, there's a possibility of this, which of course, again, leads to, we speak about this often, analysis paralysis, right? Sometimes in life, you just have to make your decisions based on what you see in front of your eyes. That's it. These are the facts you got. Don't start speculating about everything or any other possibility. Just go with what you have in front of you and move yourself forward. So Rav Chisda says, witnesses in Idis, come on, let's go. If they're not here now, then Lamaisa, again, we move forward. Now, I will tell you, does that mean that there aren't circumstances where we know that if we know with certainty that there are witnesses somewhere that we would try to get them? No, that of course works. We'll say, as Tosfos already points out in this case over here, that the Rabbanan are saying we heard there are witnesses in Idis, right? Not that we know, right? If you know for sure there are witnesses, you know their names, you know their phone numbers, you know their addresses, okay, let's bring them on in, right? But Lamaisa, I heard there are witnesses in Idis. It's fantastic. There's a lot of nice things in Idis, right? But Lamaisa, we're not going to stall the process over here because of some possibility of witnesses in some faraway place. Incredible. So the Gemara says, Mia lo listnu kaman. Rabbi say, this is such a profound statement. They're not in front of us now. Rabbi say, in life, you cannot hold progress up because of circumstances that are not in front of you right now. You can't hold progress up because of what if. What if? Because if you get held up in life by the what if, then you will accomplish absolutely nothing. Because there's always some variable that could occur, right? There's always some curveball that could be thrown at you. In life, you have to move yourself forward based on the set of facts and set of circumstances that present themselves in front of you now. If they're not here, right? Lo lesnu, come on. If they're not in front of us, let's move forward. So the Gemara says, said, Istan v'te'aser. Literally, again, it's talking about a different case. Right, that Allah Lamaisa, right, Rabbi Chanina, so we'll say he's quoting over here the case of Rabbi Chanina. Rashi says over here, this was, we're not going to get into this right now, because of time, I want to finish the daf. Rabbi Chanina's case, look at Rashi, last white line in Rashi, Biksuvas Gabe Banse Dishmo Dishtabion Vasner Blebe Midrasha, Rabbi Chanina, Vukmiro the Shavuye Abroi, Ha'amra Nishpesu to Horani. So we'll say the daughters of Shmuel were taken captive, they came to the base medrash. Now again, there's a concept that in general we assume that Allah Lamaisa, a woman who's taken captive, is violated by her captors. The exception to this rule would be if a woman herself says, I was taken captive, but I wasn't violated. Rabbi will say, why? Because that's the concept of pesha asar hua pesha hitir. If you're the one who brings to light, if you're the one who informs us of the information, you're also believed to qualify the information. So therefore, the daughters of Shmuel are saying, we were taken captive. They're sharing that information. As such, they were believed to qualify it, that halacha l'maisa, that Allah said they were not taken captive. So I said, so go on, Rashi said, I'm sorry, that they were not violated. Thank you. So Rashi goes on, I'm just skipping a little bit in Rashi. So they said to Rabbi Chanina, but there are witnesses overseas who knew that the daughters of Shmuel were taken captive. So this is not a case of Pesha Asar, Pesha Hitir. They're not the ones introducing the information to us. There's independent testimony that they were taken captive. As such, they should not be believed to say that what? They weren't violated. To which Rabbi Chanina responded, so because there are witnesses in some far-flung place, ultimately, again, the daughters of Shmuel should be aser. So we'll say, you see from here, from Rabbi Chanina, that testimony is only meaningful if what? If it's in front of us now. Bless you. If it's in front of us now. You know, the idea that maybe there is testimony in some far-flung place, we can't operate like that. A legal system and life have to operate based on the circumstances as they present themselves in front of us in real time. So as therefore, going all the way back, Rav Chisda says to the mother of Ruvain, look, or to the Rab, so to the mother of Ruvain, you're not believed to go ahead and tell me that it was a prut and thereby Asa Rachel upon Shimon. To the Rabbanon who said, but maybe there are witnesses, that's nice. If they're not here now, where they don't mean anything. Abai v'Rava. So we'll say Abai and Rava did not agree with Rav Chisda. They didn't agree with Rav Chisda. Right, now we'll say, now ultimately again, now the reason they didn't agree with Rav Chisda, we'll say, so watch this, there's two things happening over here. Rav Chisda will say essentially saying two things. What is he saying? Two things. Number one, Rav Chisda rejects Shmuel. Right, what did Shmuel say? That even if something is not worth a pruta here, she's still Savei Mikudeshes. Why? Maybe worth a pruta somewhere else. First of all, Rav Chisda rejects that. Number two, Rav Chisda also rejected. Rav Chisda said, if the witnesses are not in front of us, they don't matter. So we'll say Abai and Rava rejected the second Rav Chisda. Abai and Rava felt, look, if you know that there are witnesses, even if they're in some faraway place, you can't simply discount that. So they do not hold to this idea of Rav Chisda that you can discount witnesses. It's different. Rabbi say, in the case of Rabbi Chanina, by the daughters of Shmuel were taken captive, it is possible for a woman who is taken captive not to be violated by her captors. How? So Lamaisa, she makes herself look repulsive. If she does that, her captors don't violate her. So therefore, again, if she comes along and tells us that she was taken captive but she wasn't violated, ultimately, again, we believe her. And if there are witnesses in some far-flung place, fine. We could still believe her because she could control those circumstances. However, again, so should ultimately, again, should we be makel in a case of a married woman? So Abai and Rav were saying to Rav Chisda, I don't understand. If there are witnesses that this blue stone was worth a pruta on Monday, I don't understand how you're so quick to dismiss that. That's pretty serious stuff. If there's witnesses, that would mean that she is married to Ruvain. So how can you simply, Rav Chisda, how can you simply just summarily dispense with that? So Rabbi say, watch this. So Rabbi say, so it turned out that Rav Chisda's psak was accepted. She wasn't, so therefore she ended up remaining married to Shimon and had a whole family with him. Ishtar mehi mishpacha besura. So generations later, there were still members of that family left over. Uparshu Rabbanan Minei. And the rabbis would not marry into that family. Incredible. Why? And it wasn't because of Shmuel, right? It wasn't because that they were worried that maybe this, like Shmuel says, maybe the stone was worth a shavar pruta somewhere else. Rather, because they held like Abai and Rava, will say why? That there were witnesses. And if you know of witnesses, you have an obligation to go ahead and find them before you go ahead and determine the final halacha. They felt that Rav Chisda was just too flippant in his rejection of out-of-town witnesses. They should have. And therefore, going to say it's interesting, the Rabbanon kind of stayed away from marrying into this family. Why? A suffix mamzerus. So we'll say, so you've got a lot of stuff swirling around there. So first of all, we still have the sheet of Shmuel, which we're not sure again about Shavar Pruta, maybe Shavar Pruta, maybe not Shavar Pruta. We also now will say have this machlokes Rav Chisda Abai and Rava about when you have the possibility of witnesses. Rav Chisda telling us you only deal with what is in front of you. Abai and Rava saying no, you kind of got to keep that in mind. If there are out-of-town witnesses, you have to try to track that down before you go ahead and arrive at a judicial conclusion. So let's go ahead, they're not finished. Hu Gavra, Daktish Bishutisa Da'asa Bishuka. This is a great case. I mean, not a great case, but an interesting case. There was a guy, Ruvain, who was Mekadish Rachel with a bundle of myrtle branches. In the Shulchan Aruch. By the way, it's actually beautiful to learn this Gemara in Erev Shabbos. You know, there's a concept, Al Pi Kabbalah, by the Sfardim it's a big thing, by the Chasidim it's a big thing, to smell myrtle branches on Erev Shabbos, to make a bore atze bisamim. So we'll say, so again, beautiful. This is a reminder again, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son, when they came out of the cave the second time, what did they see? They saw the old man running home with two bundles of myrtle branches. Echad for Zachar, Echad for Shamar. So beautiful. Let's learn a Gemara about this. Bishutisa da'asa. So he was Mekadesh, a woman with a bundle of myrtle branches in the shuk, in the marketplace. Shalcha Rav Acha Bar Huna l'Kaneid Rav Yosef, Ki agav namai. So they sent Rav Yosef. So Rav Acha Bar Huna sent Rav Yosef. What's the status of this kiddushin? Shalach lei. Rav Yosef said, Nagdei kirav, flog him like Rav. V'itzrich gita de Shmuel, and ultimately go ahead and require a get like Shmuel. Both say, now what does this mean? So watch this. Nagdei kirav. So why do you have to go ahead and Dirav mangid alman al Kaddish b'shuka. We'll say Rav used to flog a guy who would affect Kiddushin in the marketplace. We'll say Kiddushin is something that is serious. A marketplace is a place of casualness. We'll say not only that, but the marketplace was also a place sometimes where people didn't just buy food. They also sometimes, unfortunately, bought other types of services as well. So Lamaisa, the act of like doing Kiddushin in the marketplace just looks immoral. So Rav would go ahead and flog a guy who did Kiddushin. I will say, now by the way, if you did Kiddushin in the marketplace, it still works. In other words, it's effective, but Lamaisa, it's wrong. Furthermore, Ba'ad Mekadesh Babiyah. So it's interesting. Rav also began the process of flogging people for Kiddushin Babiyah. Once again, Rav felt not the right way to go ahead and do things. Rashi says, Mishum Pritzusa. Right? Also going ahead and getting married without shidduchim. I will say shidduchim means ultimately, again, without prior arrangements. The aldim evatel gita. All right, you know what? We're going to stop over here for today. Okay, yeah. It was a long Amud Aleph. Give me a break. You know what I'm saying? So stop over for today. Again, it's a shorter daf tomorrow. No, it's not. But we'll be fine. We'll be fine. Again, tomorrow, great sugya, Rav. Really great. We'll get into this. So again, we have a lot of outstanding information still. How do we pass in Rav Chisda? How do we pass in Rav Chisda? Do we pass like Rav Chisda or like Shmuel? And what do we do about Eidos in terms of adjudicating or delivering a final adjudication? And Rav's statement that now flogging everyone. And Mirat Hashem tomorrow. Shkach, I will say.
Information about that flight from people on the flight. People started writing, publishing what they're writing, how she made